I'm Micah Smith, and it's time for another AA Illustrates. In this episode of AA Illustrates, we're going to take a look at the greatest package you've never heard of. And specifically, we're going to be talking about the IQBot Classifier package. And I'm going to break down why this is a really exciting package. It's one of my favorites. It's a really cool one that I've been using recently. And we'll talk exactly about how that works and how you can implement it. So first off, if you're familiar with IQBot is Automation애니웨어's IDP solution, Intelligent Document Processing, and it enables you to extract content from your images, right? So maybe I'm dealing with invoices, and I've got invoices from like 15 different vendors. Using IQBot, I can extract the details that are like the stuff that's the same across all of them, using IQBot, and then make use of that data, right? So I'm going to extract the invoice number, the invoice date, the total amount due, stuff like that. I'm going to extract all that data, and then I'm going to use it to take some kind of action. And maybe that's entering that invoice data into a system of record. Maybe that's saving out the invoice. Maybe that's actually setting up payment for the invoice or setting up at least approval for that. So that's generally how people are using IQBot. Now, I want to talk about how this flow generally works for most people. And it starts with reading the images from something, right? And that something is usually filled in with like a file share. Maybe files show up there every once in a while. I scan that directory. That kicks off my process. I go do extraction, whatever it is. That might be emails, right? I get these emails. I've got an inbox for my invoices. All of my different vendors will send me their invoices to that inbox. We process them from there. So my bot goes, it reads those emails and then processes them accordingly. So no matter what it is, fill in your blank there, right? You're getting your images from something. You then go to the extraction phase. And in the extraction phase, that's where you're actually sending these images to a learning instance in IQBot. And when you send it to that learning instance, you're saying, hey, this is a learning instance that's been set up to deal with invoices, right? So I'm going to send the invoices that I just read from that directory to this IQBot learning instance that's been set up for invoices. IQBot will extract the data from those different invoices, and if any of my required fields are not able to be extracted, maybe because it's a bad image or it's like a terrible scan that someone like took a picture of the document on their bed and it's like really small and it's hardly readable, in those cases, there is the opportunity for within the IQBot interface to correct or perfect the results of that extraction. And so that's kind of my exception handling. Regardless of whether I've done some exception handling or whether I've extracted the contents correctly, that's when I get to my delivery. And we kind of described this a little bit already, right? My delivery might look like storing the images. It might look like initiating a workflow. I'll get my head out of the way. It might look like taking some kind of other action, right? Which might be paying that invoice, or if it's not an invoice, it's some other kind of bill, right? Utility bill or something like that. I'm going to pay that utility bill. I'm going to log into the vendor to make sure that it matches the details that we see on the invoice, right? Lots of different stuff you can do with an RPA platform to be able to take that next step, which here I've called delivery, but it could be whatever comes next. Now, if we wanted to look at a more mature process for intelligent document processing, I would argue that it starts with classifying our images, right? If we looked at that last example, I'm getting my images from someplace. So it's from an email server, it's from a file share someplace, right? I'm getting those images. Assuming that they've all been like sorted and classified and they're in the right folders already, I'm good to go. But if I start to get images that are, hey, someone put this in the invoice folder and it's actually, a purchase order, or that might be okay actually. It might be like a mortgage document, right? Well, that doesn't make sense. And now IQBot's going to have trouble with that because the learning instance that I've set up is set up for invoices only. It's not set up for handling mortgage documents. So that's where classification comes in. And with classification, what I'm able to do is I can train my own custom classification model using my own images, and that can do both text and image-based classification. So I can train my own custom model. I can use that for classifying images on the fly. I also have the ability to retrain my classification model. So let's say I've got a sample of like 500 images right now, and they're kind of broken up between like these 6 different types of documents. if I went back and said, oh, I've actually got a larger sample set now, or I've got a new type that I need to train into this, I can do that retraining on my model. And that enables me to make this classification even better in the future, right? Even more accurate. Now, why does that classification matter? Well, it matters because now I can start to consider which extraction, and here I called them extraction, but really it's going to be what learning instance do I send these images to. So I can do that specific extraction based on the classification that I've determined for that image. So if it comes through and it's a mortgage document, cool, I'm going to send that to the learning instance that's set up for mortgage documents. If it's an invoice, great, I'm going to send that to the learning instance that's been set up for invoices. So that classification can help me to drive my extraction or drive my learning instance extraction, where in IQBot, I can select exactly what learning instance I want to use as I take this image in. So it allows me to be a lot more specific about like, oh, okay, that was an invoice. Oh, okay, that's a utility bill. Oh, okay, that's a bill of lading, right? Whatever it is, whatever my document is, however I've classified it, I can then be more intelligent about the way that I send that to extraction. That also means that I can be more intelligent about what I do for my delivery. So that could mean that like, okay, I'm referencing like 3 different learning instances in this one bot, but based on the extraction or based on the learning instance that I've selected, which is again based on the classification, I can now choose exactly what happens, right? So, oh, okay, it was a utility bill. It needs to go to this one team. I need to save the document here. I need to validate that the amount is correct in this other way. But if it's invoice, I do a very different process, right? And so that could mean that based on that classification, I've sent to a specific learning instance. I have also triggered a specific subtask or another bot to execute to do actions that are specific to that classification, specific to that document type. So my specific extraction may mean specific delivery, and that means that I'll be doing something different for those different document types. Okay, so that's why classification matters. That's where I see the next level of maturity in intelligent document processing. So how do we get there? There is a package that is called the IQBot Classifier package. I know this slide is kind of text heavy. It's mainly for a reference. I'm not just going to read it to you, but this package enables me to intelligently classify incoming documents and images and make sure that I'm sending them to the appropriate learning instance. So there's 3 total actions. There is classify, there's classify document, and there is train classifier. The train classifier action enables me to classify, train, retrain. Actually, it doesn't allow me to classify. It allows me to train and retrain a model. I give it a set of tagged images, and I tell it exactly where those are. I tell it where to save out the model. Likely that would be on my local directory, but then I can upload it to the control room if I want to. And it will do that training for me, and I'll show you that here in a second. The next is classify document and classify. Now, both of these are very similar, right? I choose whatever my incoming document is, right? So maybe it's an image that I've just got off of an email. I've saved it to a local temp directory. I'm going to point to that path and try and get the classification of that file. Honestly, classify document and classify, to me, they look like they work the exact same. Classify document is supposed to be for pre-trained document types, splitting up documents. From what I've seen, it works very similar to classify. So you can use both of those. We'll be using classify in the example we're going to look at here in a bit. Freeze. Okay, so I'm editing this video, and I know that I said that the classify document and classify are very similar. After recording this, I ran one more test because I wanted to identify what the nuance was between the two. And I'm going to show you this here on my screen. If you keep watching the video, you're going to see that I end up running a demo. And when I run the demo, I put in a multi-page document that I know is going to fail my classification methods. On the left side of my screen here, you can see that I have used the classify document. On the right side of my screen, you will see that I've used classify. So the difference is classify document will classify only at the document level. So if I've got a multi-page document, let's say it's a mortgage application and it's got a bunch of stuff inside it, and I don't want to break up whatever is that stuff inside it, I would use the classification of classified document. If I do want to break all that stuff out and have all those files individually, then I'd want to use classify. So again, just to reiterate this, classify is going to work at the page level. Classify document is going to work at the document level. Okay, now back to this other Micah. But in that case, I'm trying to classify an image based on that model that I've already created. And when I do that, I'm going to pass it the path to an image. I'm going to pass it a location to save the results out. And then it's going to come back to me with and this is kind of weird. It comes back with a list of dictionary objects. But inside that dictionary object, or one of the dictionary objects, what we will see is the image, the page number, the actual classification that it thought, right? So based on, this training model that you've created, this is the classification that I think is correct, and its confidence score. And so if it says like, hey, I'm 3% sure this is an invoice, I probably don't want to trust that. But if it says it's 90% sure that's an invoice, then I can make decisions accordingly, right? So I might say, hey, anything greater than 75% on the confidence, I'm going to move forward with it. If it's lower than 75, I might save it out to a shared drive so that I can use that for retraining in the future, or dig in a little bit more to see why this image isn't classifying correctly. If we look at how to do this training, and I'm going to show you this here in a second, so we'll just talk through it temporarily, and then I will show you exactly how this works. This is how I set up and do my training. Now, at the top here in the right, you can see that I can either select to train or retrain a model. If I train, I have to fill out all this stuff. For retraining, there's only 2 fields to fill out, right? And it's just asking me for like, where's a training directory and where does this thing go? But if I'm training for the very first time, this is what I have to set up. And I would select where's my training folder path. Inside of my folder path, I'll have to have individual folders for basically tagging my different types. So I might have a folder that's called invoices. Inside of that, I need to have all my different invoices. Those can be named however. It's just important that that parent folder is named off of the classification type that I want to use. So as I go through and do my training, it's going to use whatever I have for that parent folder for all of my different classification types. It'll work with PDFs. It'll work with all the basic image types that IQBot supports, so it works very well. I also give a model name, and this is just for my own reference, like what I want to call this model so that I can reference it later on. Maybe it's for a specific group, it's for HR, it's for accounts payable, whatever it might be. I can give that a name. I give an output folder, so it's going to create a zip file for my classification. That's the result of my classification. It's my classification model. Inside of that zip file is an ICMF file. That is my actual model itself, but we can just reference the zip itself for my entire model, like what I'm going to reference when I use this in Classify. Now, for my advanced settings, you don't have to change this, and actually I would encourage you to leave it as is, but I do want to explain the differences here and what you can actually set up. So when you're setting up your training optimization, you have 3 options. You can choose precision, which is a ratio of correctly predicted positive observations to the total of predicted positive observations, points to low false positivity rate, and recall, which is a ratio of correctly predicted positive observations to all observations in an actual class, and it's basically telling us how correct we were in our labeling. If you use the default, which is F1, it's a weighted average of the precision and the recall. So that's going to be the best for you. If you really want to fine tune this, if you really want to do it yourself, you can select one of those. I would encourage you to select F1. That's what I've used for all of my models so far. Below that, you do have the ability to select the recognition language, which matters if you're doing text-based classification. But you can select if you want to do text-based, image-based, or text and image-based. So you do have some options there. Again, I leave it on text and image just because that's how I've been doing it. It seems to work really well, but you can play around with that as well. Finally, for the OCR settings, you can extract all text blocks or just extract text from images. I leave both of those. It's fine with me. I want it to do whatever it needs to make the best model that it can. So I leave all those settings in the advanced alone, but I wanted to explain how they work. So let's take a look at a demo and let's see exactly how this works. Now, there's a little bit of prep work that I've done, and that's just to be able to create this directory, which is my stuff, right? So I've got this IQBot Classifier folder. I will share this on our GitHub, and I'll also put this on the description below, so you'll have all of that. If you want to play along with me and try this on your own, you can do that. But I've got my bank statements, credit memos, invoices, mortgage apps, purchase orders, utility bills. Now, this is great for an example here. It doesn't make a ton of sense, right? Like, what inbox is taking in all 6 of those different types? It's really not like a super common thing, but I could understand having like invoices and purchase orders possibly coming in together. So, use this as you need it, but obviously this specific example doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So inside each of these folders, like I said, I had to name these because this is what's going to be used for the classification types that my model is going to train off of, right? And that's what it's going to make its predictions off of once I've submitted some other images. So if I open up bank statements, I've got a bunch of samples of bank statements here. Credit memos, same thing. I've got a bunch of samples of all this stuff. One key point is you do have to have 20 examples, I believe it was. Yeah, there's 20 here. So you have to have 20 examples of sample images. I have, for the purposes of just trying to get this demo together, I've replicated a lot of these images. So like Invoice 9 TIFF is the same as Invoice 9 PDF. They look the same, just one is a PDF, one is a TIFF. That's not a great practice. So if you're actually doing this, use a real set of images from your organization or whatever you're training this for. I would also say make sure that they're representative of the images that this classifier will see in a real production environment. So if it means that I'm getting images from a scanner, I need to get images from a scanner to train with. If it means I'm getting primarily PDFs from email, I need to find some PDFs from email so that they're representative of the real images that this classifier will always see. Because if I train it off of stuff that doesn't look like what's really coming in, it's going to be kind of a useless practice, right? It's not going to be very accurate. So make sure that as you're coming up with your samples to do this training, that you've got images that are very representative of your image set. So that means the resolution should be the same, the color depth, whatever enhancements you're trying to do to the image. You want to make sure you've done all of that before you've sent this to this classification training so that it creates a model off the appropriate images. All right, so all of that aside, basically all it is a bunch of folders with the respective images inside of that. Now, what we're going to do is I've already created a folder here that I'm going to use. This is AA Illustrates and Classification. I'm going to create a new bot. We'll call it AA Illustrates Classify and hit Create and Edit. Again, I'm using Automation 360 here. I think I'm in .22 specifically, but this will work with anything above .22. So .23 is fair game as well. The package itself is called IQBot Classifier. So there it is. And the first thing we're going to do is use the train classifier action. So like I said here, we do have the ability to select train or retrain. If it's retraining, I just have to point to where's the existing zip that it's going to replace, and then what's my training folder for doing my retraining. Since we don't have one right now, we're going to create a new one. So I'm going to give a training folder path. Let me find that path we were just using, which is right here. I'll put that in there. Optionally, you can browse for these as well, but I'm not. I will give a model name. So let's call this AA Illustrates Classify Model. And I will give a model output path. So I'm going to put the exact same directory. So what it's going to do is at the root of this IQBot Classifier directory, I'll get a zip file here. And that will be my model itself. So we'll see that here in a minute. For my training optimization, I'm going to leave it at F1. For my classification type, again, I can do text, image, or both. I'm going to leave it at both. And I can also change my recognition language. All of my documents are fortunately in English, so I can select that, and I'll hit save. Now, that was a super simple bot that we've just created. This is not the bot that is going to be running in a production environment, right? This is one that we would just run locally because I'm using it for the purposes of creating this model. So what I'm going to do is run this, and through the magic of video editing, I will probably speed this part up or cut this a little bit, because it takes a couple minutes to do the training. Even though I've got, I guess, 120 images, it does take a few minutes to train the model. So I'll speed this part up. All right, so that completed. Looking at my clock, I know you probably can't see that. It looks like it took about 3 minutes in total. 3 minutes being generous. It was probably closer to 2 something, but it took about 3 minutes. So as our output, we should go out here and we can see our model has been created. So I've got my AA illustrates classify model.zip. If we go inside here, say yes. Here's my ICMF file, which is my model itself. Doesn't mean a whole lot. You will see that phrase referenced in the classify, but that actually is my model. Now, in a real production environment, right, what we just did, the thing that took like 3 minutes, that's not going to be something that happens every time. That's a one-time event, right? Because what I'm trying to do now is I want to use my model that I've just created to create predictions, right? So I want to pass an image and that model location to my classify action, and then I want to get back a prediction of, hey, what is this? What is this image? How can we classify it? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Control/ to disable this action, and we will go to classify. And here we would choose an input folder. So this is pointing to a specific file. What I'm going to do is let's loop through every single file in a folder. I've got a sample directory set up of just like some dummy images so we can see how this works. So I'm going to go here. Let's see, for each file in a folder, let me give that folder path. So I've taken some images. Let's go, we'll use this one. So ctemp IQBot to process. So here I've got a collection of some different images. Some of them are of the types that we just trained on. A couple of them are not, because we want to see what it looks like when it's not able to classify something and what that means for us and how we would handle that. So I'm going to copy this. We've got 9 total images there. So this will be our folder path. And then for my variable mapping, I will, let's see, v file name. Oh shoot, that's the wrong one. This should be name. This is where I would create my new variable. V file name. And then we'll do one more for extension. S extension. You know what? That was a that was like a a V11 Freudian slip there, right? I created a variable that was starting with a V. I literally was just building a version 11 bot yesterday, so I don't normally do that. Let's go. We'll call this one V or S file name. Man, that's I haven't done that before. All right. The only difference, the only reason I corrected that is because in Automation 360, variables are statically typed. So I usually try to prefix the variable type, or the variable name, I should say, with its type. So S for string. But what I've got out here is the name and extension for every single file that will be in our directory. I'm going to copy this folder because that's going to be the path that we're going to use for passing a file in. So we'll use that. And then it's going to be slash, I'll press F2 for file name, S file name, and then I'll put a period. And for fields like this where you have a lot going in there, you can actually drag this bar over and see a little bit more. So I'm going to put period, and then I'll put S extension. There we go. So that will be unique for every time through our loop. It's going to be whatever file that we're focused on based on the looping. That will be the path to the file. For my classifier, this references grabbing the ICMF file itself. I'm actually just going to point to the zip file, ctemp, and it was IQBot Classifier, and right here. So I'm going to point to that zip. And then for my output directory, I'm going to create a subdirectory here and just call it output. So let's do that real quick to process. There we go. There's my output. And then my confidence threshold. So I can set my confidence threshold here, and that's going to determine if it goes to my output directory or not, or where it goes in my output directory. So I'm going to put this as 75, which is just one that I've typically used. I would say, as you're determining your confidence threshold, do a lot of testing. You want to build your model with a certain set of images, but then when you're doing your testing to validate your model, you want to use a separate set of images, right? So that what we're testing against hasn't been seen as a part of the training. Now, I'm not doing that here because I only have so many images, but you would want to split those two groups up, right? You would have a train set and you'd have a test set, and you would keep those separate. Finally, for the classification output, again, this is the one that's a little bit weird. Notice here it says it returns a list of dictionary objects. So what I'm going to do is I will create a list. Let's call this one L dictionary objects. Naming variables is a surprisingly challenging part of developing. All right, so we've got that. And then we want to actually see what the result was, right? So now what I'm going to do is do another loop, and I'm going to loop through my list. And my list is going to be L dictionary objects. And for my where I want to write current variable, we're going to choose dictionary here, because remember, everything in that list is a dictionary. So this will enable us to reference that directly. And I'll go D classification result. And the subtype is going to be string. That's okay. I'll hit create and select. We'll hit save. And then what I'm going to do is, let's do a pop-up here. So message box. And here we'll display the results. So if we go back here, we have file name, page index, category, and confidence. So I'll say file name, colon, and then I'm going to reference that key within my dictionary. So D classification results, here is going to be file name. I'll do the same thing for page index. We'll just copy this one. I think page index was all lower. These are case sensitive, so make sure you get them right. No, I was capital. Category and confidence. All right. We'll fix that. Category is going to be the classification. So it should match one of those folder names that we had from our original trading folder. So D classification results, and that's going to be category. And the last one is going to be our confidence. And we'll close that after 5 seconds. All right. I think we should be good. Let's go ahead and run this and see what comes up. So again, this should not take nearly as long as it did for the training. We should see some of these classification results popping up pretty quickly. So our bank statement looks like it classified correctly, just going off the file name. Our cable bill, it classified as an invoice. This is one that I hadn't included in the training set. So this is one that I knew was going to be an exception. It only had a 24% confidence. So that means that if we're going to have cable bills coming in, we should move those and have their own thing. Same with this one, right? I've got the credential manager README, which is actually a multi-page PDF. I knew that it wasn't going to classify correctly, so I wanted to send it through here so we had some examples of what it looks like when things are not classifying. And you can see that its confidence is usually around 30 at the highest. When we've got things that we actually know should classify, so here's a credit memo, 95%, 94% for this invoice, 95 for this invoice, 94 for our mortgage app, 94 for a purchase order, utility bill was 95, and I think we're done. So if we go and look at the output here, right here, here's my output directory. I can see that all of the stuff that classified correctly is in its respective folder, right? So we had one bank statement, that's fine. We had, I think, 2 invoices, so they're both here. We had 1 utility bill, that's cool. So I'd want to check this stuff just to make sure, like, was this actually something that's a utility bill? And it is in this case, but I'd want to check that just to make sure that like it's classifying like I thought it would. But the other thing I want to pay close attention to is this unclassified folder. And this is the stuff that didn't meet my confidence thresholds. So this is every single page of that README that I said was gonna not classify. And that's correct, right? It wasn't supposed to. This isn't something that we trained our model on. So of course it's not going to classify appropriately. And same thing with this cable bill. This is a sample Comcast cable bill. We had some utility bills in here. We didn't have something that was similar enough to this, so it wasn't able to be automatically classified. So we'd want to basically save some of these images, save those for later training our model, so that like, hey, once I've got 20 plus of my cable bills, if I'm really going to be seeing a lot of these kind of README documents, maybe I create a model that includes those as well. But this enables me to then make intelligent decisions after I've made that classification, right? So we've gone through here, we classified each of those images. I could then determine, all right, if it was a utility bill, send that to my learning instance for utility bills. If it's an invoice, send that to my learning instance for invoices. If it's a PO, right, send that to my learning instance for POs. And I can be very prescriptive about exactly how I send those different images to my learning instances, and then also what happens afterwards, right? So, hey, I've processed that invoice. It might have a different flow or a different workflow that gets kicked off as opposed to what happens to my purchase orders or to my cable bill, right? So you can be very prescriptive in how you do that and be very specific on what happens for the, the after actions after we've been able to extract the document's values. Last thing I want to talk about on the PowerPoint here is a quick Q&A, right? I know that this is just me talking right here, so you don't actually get the chance to ask questions, but these are the questions I think you probably had. First off, how do I get this? You're right in noticing that the IQBot Classifier package does not show up in the default package set for Automation 360, nor does it show up in CE as of right now. The best way to get this is to talk to your account manager or your CSM for access to this package. They can go through with you the process for requesting and gaining access to this package and what the licensing is like and things like that. Hopefully we'll have CE access or Community Edition access for this on the way. Trying to see what we can do there to enable people to test this out or at least see how it works in community. Can this work on emails, right? I know that's going to be a question we would get, like, okay, cool, that worked on images, but can I do this for my emails? Technically, you probably could, but again, this works off images, right? So we were using this off images, off of PDFs, things like that. What you'd want to do is possibly consider converting your emails to an image and then doing classification off of text only. That would be the first thing I would try if I wanted to really do this with emails. And that would enable me to basically be doing a text-based classification with a weird like image conversion to start with, right? And there's a file converter package you can use. I think it will go text document to image. We can add that later if it's not there, but that would enable you to use this to classify really whatever you wanted. I haven't tried it with text files, so maybe it works. Let me know in the comments below if it has. I didn't try that specifically, but that would be another thing to try. Where can it go from here, right? So we talked about this is kind of the next level of maturation in an intelligent document processing solution. retraining capabilities of this are huge, and that's an understatement at best, right? This integrated with ARI for human-in-the-loop processing is hugely powerful, right? So just like our example that we looked at, we had a couple documents that were not able to be classified. If I were to send those documents to an ARI user and ask that ARI user to classify those documents, I could then collect the classification decisions of those ARI users, use that to automatically retrain my model, automatically promote that model to production, and in that way, my bot is continuously getting smarter at the way that it's doing classification, making use of that ARI user's classification assistance, right? So they come in, they help to classify an image that wasn't able to be classified by our automated methods. We could pass over like, hey, this is what the model thought it was. This was the model confidence. Do you agree? Or is it something totally different? Regardless, we can make use of the decision that that human made to then retrain the model and improve that classification in the future, okay? So that's the next level of maturity on that. We'll do something demoing that process coming up here before too long, but that's where this goes from here, and I'm really excited about that integration. Hey, thanks for hanging out with me this whole time. Hopefully you learned something new about the IQBot Classifier package. My name is Micah Smith. This has been AA Illustrates. If you like this kind of content, be sure to like and subscribe. We've got lots of tutorials already on our YouTube channel. We've got more tutorials on the way. I'd also encourage you to check out developer.automationanywhere.com. That's our developer portal where we have a lot of these kind of tutorials as well, both in video and written format. There's also resources you can download there as well. Okay, cool. Until next time, go be great.